isn't. And so we'll talk through some of those scenarios. I would love for y'all to be able to put some things in the chat. I would love for this to be interactive. And so if y'all have particular questions or topics or things you want me to cover today, or if you just want to say hello, please feel free to put it into the chat, and I'll be looking over at my other screen so that I can kind of stay current with that. So feel free to engage in the chat in that way. My name is Abby Horton. I do teach at the Capstone College of Nursing here at UA, and it is a joy and a privilege to get to do so. And I'm an assistant professor and teach in the undergraduate program. I'm a registered nurse. I'm a certified health and life coach, which is why I'm with y'all today. And I'm a former Wellbeing Ambassador for the Honors College, where I taught for 10 years, and I'm one of your wellness class educators. You can reach me at abby.horton@ua.edu, and I will be happy to answer any questions. If you have comments or feedback, or just, need a resource, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to do that. Okay, so this presentation is just for educational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. If you do have more specific questions or health concerns, always please contact your healthcare provider, but I'll be able to answer general questions for you. So some of our goals are really to talk about reasons why we might have everyday aches and pains. If we have them more chronically, so over time we have the same aches and pains, it may be that there's something more, serious or more involved going on. But if we just have occasional aches and pains, that could be something that, is just kind of a situational occurrence, or it could be that, we need to do some things every day to prevent some of those aches and pains. Like, if we are sporadic with our workouts, it may be helpful for us to do a lot of stretching and a lot of, walking and things like that, conditioning type exercises to prevent those occasional aches and pains. And so we'll talk more about both of those. We'll talk about how to manage those aches and pains, and then learn those specific strategies to support pain relief and to prevent the aches and pains, and some of the other challenges you might feel as you're more active. All right. Thanks for popping all that in the chat, Miranda. So just because something is common doesn't mean it's normal. The first time I heard that, it was like a light bulb moment went off, because a lot of times we'll say that something is a side effect, or we'll say something is really common or expected in healthcare, and we think that just because it's common means that it's normal, that we should feel that way. It's really common for people who are in their, late 30s to early 40s and beyond to have everyday aches and pains. But is that truly normal? Is that what we should expect? And I think that probably could be answered in a lot of different ways. It's very nuanced and complicated, but I would like to think that we, really shouldn't have aches and pains every day just because we're in our 30s and 40s and beyond. Miranda and I were talking about this kind of offline a couple of weeks ago about I'm approaching 40. I'm 38, so a year and a half and I will be 40. And we just did the Your Health Over 40, and we talk about aches and pains in that class as well. And so I would like to think that we won't be expecting to have aches and pains every day. Now, I do have some chronic health conditions, and I do have aches and pains, but I'm going to share a little story later on in the presentation about something that I made one small change and it made such a difference. And I hope that will be not only inspirational to you, but maybe also helpful and informative. So this is just something to think about. So if you haven't gotten a checkup this year, we really encourage you to get an annual checkup. Go see your healthcare provider. That might be a medical doctor, that might be a nurse practitioner. In some areas of the country, that it might even be a physician's associate, although we don't see that typically here in the Southeast. But whoever you see for your healthcare needs, that is something that we really highly recommend. If you do have aches and pains and they persist, I would say more than 1 to 2 weeks, and over-the-counter, medications, um, you know, kind of we think of the acronym RICE, rest, ice, compression, meaning that you're putting something on there to support it, like we used to do old school ACE bandages, and then elevation, meaning that you're elevating the arm or the leg or whatever it is that's bothering you. If RICE and over-the-counter medications and those kinds of things, heat therapy doesn't help you, then it may be that you need to get some more evaluation. So it might be that a chiropractor or a physical therapist or a medical doctor or nurse practitioner needs to really look at whatever the problem area is for you and give you some really good tailored feedback. So I typically say that most people can recover from most things within 1 to 2 weeks. If it's a small injury or if it's, just a kind of isolated ache and pain. If it's more serious than that, of course, it could take longer, but that's a general rule of thumb. And so I like to tell people that because oftentimes, if you're new to having these little aches and pains, you don't know, okay, should that be better by now? And I think that can be really helpful. It's a good reminder for me too. When I have an injury, sometimes the nurse brain goes out and you're just in pain and you're thinking, should I be over this by now? So 1 to 2 weeks is a good one to kind of have in mind. Having that routine physical exam, so that annual checkup, like I mentioned, is so important because it can help you form a relationship with your care provider and also lets them get a good baseline of like what's your personality normally like when you're pain free and when you're not sick. What's your blood levels and your blood work look like when you're not sick, when you're not fighting an infection or you're not recovering from an injury. And then any x-rays or tests or things that your particular situation calls for is always better to be done when you're feeling your best. So it forms that baseline and also helps to form that therapeutic relationship with your healthcare provider. And then once you have this information, you really can take the next steps in terms of healing and preventing accidents or injuries or aches and pains. And so a lot of times people will just have what we call diffuse, um, which means kind of all over muscle pain and soreness and just feeling tired and fatigued. If you don't mind, if you wouldn't mind putting like a 1 in the chat, if that's kind of what you're really more experiencing, or a 2 if it's something else. That would be really helpful because then maybe we can help support each other. Um, and then, if it is something else, is it an accident? Is it injury? Is it like something that you've just like strained, that sort of thing? So some ones, some general pains. A lot of people have general like tissue, muscle aches and pains where you just almost feel like you have the flu. I don't know if that's a good description for y'all, but that's sometimes how I feel. I feel achy, like I've got the flu, but I'm not sick. That's what a lot of people will describe it as. Yeah, so a lot of ones, and then we've got some twos intermixed. Yeah. So I'm going to talk to you about some ways that we can address that general ache and pain. So we'll talk more in just a second about the solutions. So some things that can cause the aches and pains. It's really important to get to the root cause because we can give medication. We can take over-the-counter medications at the local pharmacy. We can do the rest, ice, compression, elevation. We can sometimes even avoid the things that are causing the aches and pains, although I think a lot of those probably wake up with aches and pains that may get better or worse throughout the day. If you have a lot of stiffness and soreness and aches and pains in the morning, and then later on in the day it gets better, things like stretching, light walking, light exercise will probably be really helpful to you, particularly if you will do that before you go to bed at night. And I'm talking maybe 5 or 10 minutes of light stretches before bed. And then when you get up in the morning, 5 or 10 minutes of light stretching in the morning. That can really be helpful to get to the point where you're not feeling so achy and tired. Now, if you wake up feeling pretty good or you wake up feeling achy and tired and it gets worse throughout the day, that's probably where you need to do some more proactive things throughout the day. Stretching is probably always a good idea unless you have a reason not to. Um, but that's where you might need more like intervention throughout the day and see, okay, am I hurting because I'm driving too much? Am I hurting because I have an old injury that's getting aggravated? Am I hurting too much because I'm doing a repetitive motion? Like sometimes when I have an office day, when I'm not in the classroom or clinical setting, my hands will ache because I've typed so much or because I've held my phone so much. And I'll notice that my fingers are really sore. Do kind of a self massage on my hands when I get home once I have some lotion or once I've given them an actual break, done something else. That can be really helpful. So it's not to say that you have to completely rest, but sometimes you just need to change the motion that your hands or your whatever it is that you're doing that's bothering you. Changing that motion can sometimes be the break that it needs. So those are some things to ask yourself and to think about as we go through the presentation, so that can help you identify, okay, what is the root cause? Stress, dehydration is a big one. So track how much water you're drinking. Any person who's on a health and wellness journey, I always tell them to start with their water intake because that's the easiest and hardest thing to control, right? A lot of us, excuse me, don't necessarily love the taste of plain water. Funny enough, Miranda and I were talking about that last week. I'm not someone that loves the taste of plain water unless I'm really, really hot and really, kind of tired and really going hard on a workout. But Miranda does. And so, like, everyone is different. So you have to find what works for you. For me, it's drinking, flavored water packets with minerals and electrolytes to make it something that I enjoy. I like that fizz and carbonation. So drinking some carbonated water, I usually do one a day. Those are the kinds of things that can help me get water in because I don't naturally love water. So dehydration can be a big factor because we are, depending on the numbers that you look at, anywhere from 60 to 70% water. Our makeup needs water. And so when we get dehydrated, we think that we just become thirsty, but we really, because we're dehydrating ourselves, we can have a lot of aches and pains. And it's just a red flag to get our attention. The recommendation is to drink half of your body weight in ounces a day, usually not more than 128 ounces and usually not less than 64 ounces of water. And so for a person who's 200 pounds, then that would be 100 ounces of water a day. And so tracking that can be really helpful. A lot of times we think that we're doing a really good job on something, but then when we go and actually track it, we think, oh, well, actually, I'm not getting as much water in as I thought. Poor sleep definitely can impact this because sleep is where we rest and then we heal and we restore. And so, if we're not getting good quality sleep, even if we're getting good numbers of hours, it's not just quantity of hours. I'm getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night. That's great. That's what we want you to do. But sometimes it's that the quality of sleep that you're getting is not great. So, for me, for example, I don't really have a difficult time getting the hours in. It's that I'll go to sleep and sometimes I'll wake up feeling more tired than when I went to bed. If any of y'all struggle with that, there are some, things that you could consider. Sometimes it's that you have a true sleep disorder and do have a sleep disorder, and that causes that for me. Um, and there are things that you can do to make that better, but that's going to lead you to have more muscle fatigue, more pain. You're probably going to be a little bit more sensitive to those kinds of sensations and overstimulation just because your body hasn't had true rest. So those are things to think about. Of course, if you have a cold or a flu or just an infection or some kind of sickness in general, you're going to have a lot of pain usually, and some aches, just probably due to the fever and to the immune response. Anemia, vitamin deficiencies, vitamin Bs, so B12 especially, and then vitamin D. Vitamin D is where I want to tell my story. So vitamin D acts as a vitamin and also as a hormone. And two of the most common deficiencies in terms of vitamins and minerals would be vitamin B, usually B12, vitamin D, and then sometimes magnesium, or you might even see zinc. Those are the four most common typically, especially for those of us in the US. And so for me, I have been chronically deficient in vitamin D for 10 plus years. And when I went for my annual checkup in April, my vitamin D was still low, even though I was taking more than the daily recommended dose of vitamin D. And so I talked to my doctor and I said, I'm taking this as prescribed. I'm taking it daily. I don't miss a dose typically. There's no reason why my vitamin D should be so low. It was 16 and the bottom number is 20 on this lab value at my doctor's office. They can vary across labs, just, as an FYI. And they like to see a vitamin D level of 60 to 80 optimally, but it can be as high as 100 plus. Okay. So mine is 16, and I've been having a lot of aches and pains. I had surgery last year to remove a tumor, and I had a lot of incisional pain. I had delayed healing, delayed recovery, and still having a ton of pain a year later.
Hey, excuse me, I need to fill out a 99 or provide documents for that.
Okay, this is the Office of Wellness and Work Life,
Um,
so you're gonna go to the
I
Human
think you need
Resources
to mute.
Service Center. Just keep going down the hallway on your right.
Thank you.
Sure. That's okay.
So sorry for that interruption. I think Someone is unmuted. So all that to say, I've had this pain for over a year and, knew that my vitamin D was low, but didn't know that it had reached like the moderate to severe level of low. And was speaking to a friend of mine who's also a nurse and said, I've tried all of these prescriptions for vitamin D. Do you have any recommendations? I've done kind of the naturopathic complementary alternative medicine route of vitamin D. I've done drops, I've done oral pills, I have done, the prescribed medication at the doctor's office where it's like 50,000 units a week. I've done all the things and I still can't get my vitamin D up. And she recommended that I take a particular brand that also has potassium in it and then supplement also with magnesium because potassium and magnesium, which I knew would actually help with absorption. And I had been taking a vitamin that had both potassium and magnesium in it. And so I thought that I was covered, but it still wasn't helping my lab values increase. And so I tried this particular brand that my friend recommended, and it was a game changer. I've dealt with low vitamin D for 10 years plus, and I've never felt any, real effects from taking vitamin D. You should get a little energy boost when you take it. You're only supposed to take it in the morning because it's supposed to be so effective with your energy that you can't sleep at night if you take it in the afternoon and evening. Y'all, that was never a problem for me. I never felt any effects. Within 1 week of taking this new vitamin D supplement, after trying dozens of others, I had no pain in my incision. I had no like generalized pain and I had energy. I would take it in the morning at 7 o'clock. And when I got home at night, I would still have energy at 7 o'clock. And that is just really unheard of for me. So I sent my friend a couple of messages and said, like, this is life changing. Thank you so much for sharing this with me because I know intellectually as a nurse and anyone who is in the medical field or it just really looks at Google, you see all of the things that vitamin D does because it acts as a vitamin and as a hormone. It controls things like pain responses and cellular health and energy and all of that. And you can know that, but my goodness, like I felt the difference in that week. And so sometimes our aches and pains have a kind of underlying medical condition or deficiency that even if we know that and we're treating it, we may not actually be able to get like an effective response because we haven't tried the thing that works well for us, right? We're all very different. And I think that's so important that we recognize our bio individuality, is what it's called. Where for everyone on this call, we might have a particular condition or challenge, but our body might need something a little different than our neighbor. And so I want to recognize that, we all may have some of those challenges. And by what I call crowdsourcing, by just saying, hey, I'm having this issue. Do you have something that you really recommend? Do you have something that has worked well for you? And just being open and willing to share your story and then to try the things out that people recommend can make a huge difference in your life. So I'm super, super grateful that, that's been something that's been helpful. And that's happened in the last 3 weeks. And I'm still reaping the benefits. I'm excited to see what my lab values are in the future. I have a checkup in October. It can take anywhere from, they say, 4 to 6 weeks to even 4 to 6 months, depending on how deficient you are, to see your levels change. And so, thank you for letting me share that story. I hope it's not only inspirational to you that things can change, but also informational because so many people are deficient in vitamins. Arthritis, of course, can be really difficult, especially on your hips and your knees. Autoimmune and chronic illness can play a role, and then injury, age-related concerns. So it's not uncommon for you to have, an injury in high school, and then you get to your 30s, 40s, and beyond, and you start having, aches and pains and almost arthritis type symptoms in the area where you had the injury, where you've not had, any problems in the past. That's true for me. I had an injury to my knee in high school, and I noticed over the last few years that sometimes, especially when it's rainy or the barometric pressure drops or I land on that knee wrong, I will have a little bit of a twinge and sometimes a little bit of an ache there. And so I'm like, oh, I don't know why that could be. And then I got to thinking back to, oh yeah, I had that injury to my meniscus. I bet that's probably why. And then inflammation. Inflammation is a widespread problem today. A lot of our diseases, our chronic diseases especially, are caused by widespread systemic inflammation. And so being able to understand what causes inflammation, again, we're all going to have a different level of sensitivity, but things like mold and toxins and seed oils and processed foods, we could name so many things, right? It's our standard American diet and lifestyle at play here. Those things cause inflammation. And so when we have widespread inflammation, there's different markers that you can look at in the blood work. You can look at SED rates and C-reactive proteins, and you can look at your complete blood count and have all of these numbers, but it's not going to tell us specifically where inflammation is in the body. And so, you could have sprained an ankle yesterday and take your blood work today and see, okay, we're having an inflammatory response. But it's often difficult to know, okay, is this an inflammatory response that is acute, meaning that it's short-lived, or is this something more chronic? And the more chronic will lead to things like cardiovascular issues. It'll lead to things like metabolic syndrome, diabetes, etc. And so making sure that when you do feel inflamed or when you are retaining a lot of water, typically you're going to see that in the face, you're going to feel it in your hands and your feet. Those are some typical places to look for fluid retention. That can be an indicator that you have inflammation, especially if it's in the morning. It also could be because you have high cortisol levels associated with stress in the morning. Our cortisol levels are designed to be higher in the morning to get us up and get us, moving and out the door, and they tend to taper off throughout the day. And so it's typical that you're going to have more aches and pains and inflammation, especially if you're having a lot of stress related issues as well. So a lot of detail on this one slide, but I really wanted to go into the possible causes because you can take an ibuprofen and put a heating pad on your injury, but what would be much more helpful to you, and what I think would be, a much better outcome, is that you figure out what's causing the issue and being able to really prevent that from happening rather than just medicating it. And then we medicate in the meantime while we figure out, okay, what's next steps. So root causes can be all of the things I named on the previous slide. And then, of course, there can be these things here. And so things like immune imbalances, structural imbalances, so think chiropractic adjustments can really help with that. Inflammatory imbalances, hormones, of course, play a big role, and that's when we think about that at midlife. Toxic and chemical exposure, digestive issues, and then mitochondrial dysfunction. So that's at that cellular level where you're not getting enough vitamins, nutrients, minerals, energy to be able to heal your body. And so your body will create aches and pains to get our attention, and because it's just causing that pain at the cellular level because we don't have what we need on board. And that can be, again, something as simple as vitamin D being low or us being chronically dehydrated. So some wellness basics. I have an entire talk on wellness basics that you can go and look at in the archived talks. And we would love for y'all to do that. There are YouTube videos. You can share them out with friends and family. But with this, I just wanted to mention, because a lot of times wellness basics are where you need to start. So sleeping well, staying hydrated, striving for a healthy plate. So that looks like what I say, eating most things in moderation. So I think it's difficult sometimes when we say, I'm not going to eat any carbs, or I'm not going to eat any of that one thing. That sometimes makes us want it more. So most things in moderation. And striving for a healthy plate looks like eating all of the colors of the rainbow, because that means you're getting all of the good nutrients and minerals and vitamins and antioxidants. Sometimes we only eat beige and brown and green food, but there's so many other colors. And then moving our body in a meaningful way every day. So taking the stairs, parking a little further away, um, doing some stretches, taking a walk, especially walks after meal times, will really help curb some of that insulin response that you get. And so if you can walk for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes after you've had a meal, especially at night, that can really be helpful in terms of regulating your insulin and your blood sugar. I listened to a podcast 2 weeks ago where they're talking about really the kind of the biochemistry of exercise and learning the science behind why certain exercises work for certain people. And it was talking about, really, it takes about 20 to 22 minutes for your body to go from burning sugar and glucose when you're doing an exercise to actually burning fat. And so it's a new study that has come out recently. And so it's like you definitely need to be working out for at least 25 to 30 minutes if your goal in that is to actually lose fat and to, lose weight overall. Now, any exercise in my book is good exercise, especially exercise that you enjoy. But if you have the goal of fat loss, it's so important that you meet, and exceed that 22 or so minute mark so that you can actually, see the results that you're looking for. And so moving your body every day, though, could be as simple as having a dance party in your kitchen while you're, waiting on supper to kind of cook. Those kinds of things matter because it's good for your cardiovascular health and it's good for your mental health. And I think 5 minutes of movement, that might not result in weight loss or fat loss, but it might make you a happier human. It might make you a heart healthier human. And so start small. It doesn't have to be a 20-minute workout, a 45-minute hour workout 7 days a week. That's probably pushing too hard, especially for someone if you've not been doing that regularly. But 3 days a week, 30 minutes each time doing something that engages you in strength training or in some kind of cardiovascular exercise is a really good starting place. And then meditation. I think of these as brain breaks. And so it could just be closing your eyes. It could just be shutting off your cell phone or closing out of your Outlook. Getting a break from all the bells and whistles and dings and notifications, listening to some music, going on a light walk without, your phone or other things to stimulate you. Or it could be true meditation. And meditation doesn't have to be what we commonly think of as a meditation practice with yoga. It can be. That's a great form of exercise and meditation. But it could be simple as turning on a Spotify playlist that has, meditation, either music or guided meditation to walk you through that. For me, my brain is always talking to me. And so I need guided meditation to actually get a break from my brain talking. I need someone else to interrupt that. And so I think that can be really helpful for beginners. And 3 minutes, 5 minutes, research shows that that's really helpful. And we've had a lot of great classes offered recently through Wellbeing that does offer the meditation classes and experiences. And so take advantage of those. An app that I really like is Fit On. Miranda actually recommended it to me last year, and I have loved it. It's been one of my favorite downloads this year. And you can do the free version, and you have access to exercises and articles on health and wellness and meditations and things like that. And so it's a great free resource, and it's called Fit On. So I have a few slides here just to go through each of those. So sleeping 7 to 8, even 9 hours nightly, going to bed at a consistent time and getting up at a consistent time is really important. Our body likes routine. Being asleep by 10 is super helpful because our circadian rhythm, it likes to repair most of our body between 10 p.m. and midnight. So if you're regularly going to bed later than that, then you're not getting the full restorative sleep that you probably need. So if you feel like you have a sleep deficit, like you've missed out on a lot of sleep recently, and I've had some big projects where I have cut into my sleep to meet those deadlines. Then what I had to do is to balance that by going to bed even earlier. So I've been going to bed sometimes at 8 and 9 o'clock at night just to make up for the sleep deficit. Going to bed early is better than sleeping in late because it's just the way that the circadian rhythm kind of acclimates and adjusts to the things that we're doing to our body. And so having an evening routine and a power down hour is really helpful. No blue light, so no phones, no tech, no cells, no bright overhead lights. Is really, really helpful because that's going to affect your corneas. It's going to affect how much light you perceive. And so our eyes, we get sleepy when it gets dark because that's telling our brains it's time to go to sleep. And so we can alter that without really knowing that by having bright lights on too late in the evening. So after dinner time at our house, we actually go to lamps only. Some people will wear blue light blockers or even colored lenses like yellows, reds, or orange glasses that you can just get on Amazon to block the light because you're still getting it even from, other things besides screens. And then keeping your room cool, dark, and quiet. So you could have a fan on, overhead, or a noisemaker fan. You could wear, a sleep mask, things like that. Sleep is going to be really critical to feeling less aches and pains, especially if you're the person that gets up feeling very achy in the morning. Hydration, like I mentioned, some hydration goals. It's always good to track your progress, half your body weight in ounces, set a reminder, set a goal. Habit stack. So every time you go get a cup of coffee, make sure you go fill your water bottle. And then make sure you actually carry your water bottle or a cup with you. I have mine today. I always have at least one cup with me. And then make sure that you take advantage of the refill stations here on campus to get you some good ice and some good water. And then I always fill it up on my way home so that I'm less tempted to stop to get something on the way. And so you also can make it fun, add things in it to make it fun, whether it's electrolytes or whether it's fruit and herbs and things like that. It can be a fun way to make water, something that you enjoy. So, nourishing your body, again, this is about a balanced meal, eating the rainbow, striving for that colorful plate, and trying to include a protein, a complex carb, and a healthy fat at every meal is really helpful for blood sugar regulation. The thing about our blood sugar is when we eat too many carbs, or when we eat too much processed food and sugar, our blood sugar can cause us to have aches and pains and can cause us to have anxiety because our blood sugar can be going kind of, up and down all day. We can have these spikes and then these drops. And that can cause aches and pains, and that can cause anxiety because our body's trying to get our attention to say, hey, something's wrong here. You're not taking care of me. I need you to adjust. And sometimes we don't adjust, we just push on through, right? We go get another cup of coffee or we go get a snack, and we kind of rinse and repeat that, right? I do that all of the time. And sometimes it's about really just pausing and saying, okay, what is my body trying to tell me right now? So, tracking your meals and snacks can be really beneficial along with your symptoms. So, you might notice that you have a sensitivity or a food intolerance by looking at the days where actually are having symptoms in the foods that you're eating. That could be really telling. And then just make one healthy change at a time. Sometimes when we are trying to reach a goal or we're trying to eliminate a symptom or we're trying to lose weight or get healthy, we try to do all of the things at one time, and that's really, really overwhelming. And that may be setting you up for failure or for disappointment. So, moving your body every day, again, low intensity things to start, like walks and swimming. It's about to be swimming weather, which is a great exercise. Dancing, Pilates, yoga, and stretching. I mean, you may just start with stretching. When I was going through my recovery last year, stretching was the first thing that I had to do. And before that, I had been working out a lot and had made a lot of personal records and had been, really in my best shape. And that surgery was so difficult for me. Literally tying my shoes and stretching were my first goals. And so, again, to encourage you that you never know where you're going to be in 6 months or a year's time, and you can make such progress in such a short amount of time if you take it one step at a time. Aim for that 30 minutes of moderate exercise where you can still talk to your friend if you're working out with a buddy, but that it's not necessarily the most comfortable. You can still have a conversation, but it's not an easy conversation to have. That's probably moderate intensity. And you can even track your heart rate. There's different levels of heart rate variability that people like to see. And you can get very nuanced and sciencey with this. But just start with just moving your body every day. And then set those realistic goals. Of course, a nutritionist, a personal trainer, we have access to all of that here at UA, with a small copay or a small fee. And I highly recommend that you take advantage. I have in years past when I started my journey, and it was so helpful to me to have another person to offer accountability and also to offer feedback on how to make changes and make adjustments. And so it doesn't mean that you always have to have a personal trainer or you always have to consult with a nutritionist, but it can be very beneficial, especially if you're getting started. And then meditation, giving your brain a break, letting it rest, having quiet time, all the things that we do for kids, we should be doing for ourselves. Meditation, again, I talked to you about what that could look like. Positive affirmations are so important. When I was working on my 85-pound weight loss, over the last 3 or so years, I would say in the morning to myself, and I've started saying this again because I'm on another leg of my health and wellness journey, was say, it's safe for me to lose weight. I lose weight effortless, and it's effortless and it's easy. It's safe and it's effortless and it's easy. Because sometimes we keep weight on because it is sort of a layer of protection, right? It is something that, for some of us, it's hormonal. For some of us, it might be, lifestyle changes. For some of us, it might be coping because we use food or other things to manage some of our stress. And it can feel, no matter where you are in your journey, it can feel very difficult and scary to make a change. And so, creating safety in the body for whatever it is that you're doing is really important. And our brain is always listening. So, repeating an affirmation that creates a sense of safety and peace, whether it's losing weight or it's aches and pains or whatever it is that you're working on, that can be really instrumental in making a huge difference in your progress. So, being present in the moment, I always say be present where your feet are. My feet aren't in my next meeting. My feet aren't in field day this morning, right? My feet are right here with you. And so, trying to be really present, but being very judgment free when our brain wanders, because our brains are going to do that. Being mindful of distractions, closing those kinds of distractions out as much as you can, and then trying to laugh every day, I think is so important. My son Charlie is one of the happiest people I know, and it's not just because I'm his mom. He's just a happy, happy human, and so he really loves hugs and he loves to laugh. And he'll always say, okay, I need to get my 12 hugs in. I'm still missing 3. There's some research that shows that anywhere from 10 to 15 hugs is something that you should strive for. It helps with your stress management and just your happiness level. Which now people are saying happierness level, which I think is really fun, is that kind of notion of working on being happier, a little bit happier every day. And so, anyway, we settled on 12 hugs a day. And he's the kid that's like, okay, I need to get my 12th hug. Can you help me out? I need another one from you. And so, those are little things that you just, want to build into your day, whether it's hugs or laughter or walking or meditation, that can really make a big difference. You wouldn't think about it helping with aches and pains, but it can. Some other more practical things that you can do: turmeric or turmeric, however you like to pronounce that, can be really impactful. Omega-6 fish oil, you can get that in multiple types of deliveries, but usually it's a gel cap. Gentle exercise and stretching and movement. More plant-based options. So even if you love meat and you do really well with meat, sometimes it can be difficult for our bodies to process meat. It just takes a little bit more effort and a little bit more in terms of like the chemistry of how we break down fat in food. Sometimes our body just doesn't have the energy reserves to be able to do that well. So going plant-based for a time, or at least even just cutting out meat, like maybe once a week to start, that can really be helpful. Stress reduction, always on the list for health and wellness. It's sometimes a lot easier said than done. But you're going to have stress, and it's not just mental stress that we have to think about, it's also physiological stress. If you're going to work out at CrossFit, which I have done that before, and it was really good in a season of my life, that's going to be a physical stressor. And so I don't want you to just think about what is physically or mentally stressing me out, but what also is physically stressing me out. Where are the ways that I can cut down on my physical stress? And then avoiding sugar, refined carbs, alcohol. Dr. Daniel Amen says that there is no safe dose of alcohol. He is a real well-renowned kind of expert in brain chemistry, brain health. And he says what a lot of the things that we call mental health, which is my background, is really brain health. And so a lot of the issues that we see as mental health symptoms, he says, are actually mental health, mental and brain health issues and deficiencies within the brain. And so he says there's no safe level of alcohol consumption. And he really encourages people that if they're having a lot of aches and pains and symptoms, particularly if it's accompanied with brain fog, to look at how much alcohol you're consuming and really start to cut back. Of course, you have to do that, with some accountability and some supervision, because if you have been having a glass of wine or 2 or 3 every night, or a beer or something like that, you can't go cold turkey. That's not good for the body either, and you don't want to add more stress by doing that. Same thing with Cokes, or anything else that you might be eating. Any of that needs to be tapered off. So, one less thing. And then always with sugar, alcohol, things like that, it's always better to consume those things with food. So that, when you're drinking a Coke, like I love a Coke. And so if I'm going to go drink a Coke, I need to make sure that I'm drinking it with one of my meals and not just going through the drive-through of my favorite place to get my Coke. Because drinking that on an empty stomach, same thing with coffee in the morning. Make sure you eat something first before you're drinking those things, because that's going to spike the blood sugar. As you're tapering those things off, taper them off one at a time too, so that your body doesn't kind of go into that shock stress response. And we all have the things that we're challenged with. And so anyway, it's not to say any of this is bad. It's just to say that if you're having, some challenges, maybe consider some of these changes. Daily meat consumption can be really difficult for some people. I'm definitely not completely plant-based. There was a time in my life when I was very, very sick with a chronic health condition, and it was so helpful for me to be plant-based only, for about a year. And it helped me. But then I knew that once I had healed, adding in good protein sources from meat was really helpful also to my healing. And so just realize that some things are seasonal, and in the season of life, you may need less alcohol or you need less meat. It doesn't mean that it's a never thing. It just might mean that you want to make a different choice for right now. And then processed foods, fried foods, which we love in Alabama, they're so good. Not the best for us, but they're good. And trans fats, we want to be really mindful of that. Trans fats are human-made chemicals. They're not truly fats, but the body reads them like a fat. And so you want to look at your packages to see, okay, what's the mineral and nutrient content on this food? How much fat am I getting? How many carbs? Like, look at all of those things. We are so conditioned to either not look at the packages on the food that we eat, or to only look at the calories. And we really need to be looking at it more holistically, looking at the ingredients on our food. If there's more than 5 ingredients, if most of them you can't pronounce, and if sugar is one of the first ingredients, the ingredients in the US are listed by how much is in that thing. So if sugar is the first thing listed, then sugar is the most, you know, ingredient in that food. And so it's really helpful to know how to read your food label so that you know what to do. And I think a lot of our challenges with aches and pains is lack of sleep, lack of hydration, and then eating foods that are really sugary and inflammatory. And then, of course, secondary to that is having those injuries that kind of pop up here and there. So stretching, deep breathing. There's something called EFT tapping. There's an actual app, the Tapping Solution. It's been on sale the last few days. It's $50 a year. It's really good for like resetting your nervous system and nervous system regulation. We have developed a class that I'll be teaching hopefully in this next year for Wellbema on how to regulate your nervous system, because a lot of times aches and pains can be because of that. If that's something that you struggle with, there's a book called Healing Your Nervous System. It's a really, really good book. It's just been published this past year, and I just finished it in April, and I'm starting to implement some of those practices. Also, very, very helpful. So, nervous system dysregulation might be an issue for you. Gentle exercise, Epsom salts baths. So I like to get Epsom salts from Mana Grocery, but you can get them from anywhere. And you just want to make sure that they don't have a lot of additives or a lot of fragrance in there. Just the Epsom salts is helpful. And that can really help because it's got magnesium in it. That can relieve some of your aches and pains. A 30-minute bath is usually what you need for that. Aromatherapy can be really helpful. There's lots of great brands out there. I trust Young Living and use Young Living. They've got a lot of those out there that are specifically for pain and muscle aches. CBD oils, which of course you have to be mindful of that because you want to make sure that it doesn't have the THC. But you can use things like a CBD massage oil that can have a lot of pain relief. Massage therapy. If you're like me and you're limited on the extra things that you're wanting to do, even doing self massage, someone can do that for you, someone that can rub your shoulders, or you can do your, hand massage yourself, like learning those kinds of things. I'm not gifted at that, but I've watched some YouTube videos on lymph massage and drainage and self massage, and that can really, really be impactful. cryotherapy, infrared sauna, acupuncture, and acupressure. So I have an acupressure mat that I use for about 20 minutes. That's really, really good at helping with the pain receptor responses. I have a prana mat, but they have other options on Amazon that are even cheaper and more affordable. Chiropractic care, usually that's recommended once a week or once every other week, and that can be very, very helpful, especially for certain types of pain. Physical therapy is always a favorite for me. Physical therapy has really changed my life and multiple times where I've had a surgery or an injury that I needed to overcome. And so I recommend physical therapy for everybody, even if you don't have an acute injury. Having an evaluation, starting that can be really helpful. We have the Hinge app also through UA that you can download and sign up for their program. And I love, love, love it. They say that if you do this physical therapy practice through the Hinge app 3 days a week, that they see something like between, I think, 58 to 64% of their participants actually see a decline in their pain response. And I definitely think that that's a great app. I use it, and multiple other people on campus use it and have really, really loved it. And you get to set your goals with your health coach. So that's another free resource. And they can send you some free products, which is always fun. So I got a free yoga mat, a free phone stand, and some loop bands to be able to do exercises, which if you've ever been to physical therapy, having loop bands is really, really helpful. And then outdoor time. So people will call that forest bathing, but getting outside, putting your feet in the grass, doing walk and talks. One of my friends and colleagues was on another talk where I talked about grounding. And so now we are doing a walk and talk every other week. And then we finish our walk and talk around the nursing building by going out into the side yard and putting our feet in the grass. And so not only are we getting connection, we're getting exercise, we're getting grounding, and we're also kind of getting the feel good effects of being outside and in nature. And if you do that, and again, 22 minutes seems to be the key today, but 22 minutes of that is supposed to really improve and reduce your cortisol levels, and research has backed that. So that's a good one. So outdoors, move your body, ground to finish, and do it with a friend. Some of the best 22 minutes that you can spend. So over-the-counter pain medications and creams, so things like BioFreeze can be really helpful for those kinds of creams. But again, there's a lot of products out there. TENS units, like you'll see typically at physical therapy or a chiropractor, can be really beneficial. You can get them at a local drugstore, or you can get them on Amazon. Any unit is probably going to work great. I have used this multiple times for like muscle tension and back pain. Works really, really well. Cold and hot therapy, kinesiology taping, especially if you have a really isolated injury. And they can do that at physical therapy. And chiropractic practices usually can do that for you. Red light laser therapy, I have a Loom red light therapy that I use usually once to twice a week, and that can really be beneficial for aches and pains. I used it on my incision when it was healing, and that definitely helped not only with a scar tissue, but also with helping to make sure that that healed and closed well. But you can use it for things like, thyroid health or an isolated injury. Like a friend of mine had a knee injury, and she put that on her knee for 12 minutes, and she did that a couple of times during the day, and the next day she was doing great. Halo therapy, that's salt therapy. You can do that at somewhere like a Purify U, or you get that good salt therapy. So sometimes when we're feeling under the weather, we just need a little immune boost. That can be another great option. And then I just included a few things here. So these are not a loop band, but this is one of those open-ended stretch bands. Cryotherapy, acupuncture, this is Epsom salts here for an Epsom salts bath. This is cupping. I'm actually still in physical therapy right now for round 2, and my physical therapist uses cupping on my scars and on my abdominal tissue to be able to break up scar tissue. And I had never known that cupping could be used in that way. Typically, you think about it being on the back for like athletes, where it brings in good blood flow to that muscle and that tissue to help with healing and restoration. Well, they even are doing it for scar tissue now. So I do that once a week, and that's a game changer. Being outside, you've got your turmeric, walking, sauna. This is a acupressure mat. Ginger and lemon tea can be really helpful for pain relief and relaxation. Being outside and grounding, massage, aromatherapy, lifting weights can be really helpful because that helps build the muscle and helps really strengthen your bone health, which is great as we age. And then lemon water for detox is also powerful. Biofreeze, I mentioned, of course, a good old-fashioned heating pad. I love that. This is a halo therapy room or salt room. Gua sha or rolling on the face. If you put these in the refrigerator, I put mine in the butter drawer. Just know that sometimes when you open the butter drawer, it might get stuck, but having this to be cool and doing actually like lymph drainage. You can have someone teach you how to do that, like especially if you go for a facial or physical therapy. Both are trained to do that, but you can also watch videos on how to do lymph massage. And there's something called the Big Six, and it's the big six areas where you have lymph nodes, and you can manually drain those. Because sometimes when our lymph is not moving, we can get aches and pains. And so I do that massage in the shower every morning. And there's an account on Instagram called Chasing Pain, and he shows you how to do the Big Six lymph massage. It's really, really simple. But that's also a good thing to pair with gua sha. Being out in the sun, it's important to not have too. I heard a doctor say, Dr. Keneally in California says, the sun is like Goldilocks, too much or too little of it of the sun is not good. So you need just the right amount of sun without sunscreen so that you're getting that good absorption. And so I subscribe to that. We need a little sun without sunscreen, but then of course you need to be mindful not to get burns and things like that. So use the sun with caution, but don't be afraid of it. Just be responsible. Red light therapy, rebounding, or even getting a vibration plate. That's what I got for a recent celebration. And I said, I want my gift to be a vibration plate that I can stand on. You might see those at different gyms or chiropractic offices. And it's very much like a rebounder. That gives you a good kind of lymph massage as well. There's some exercises here that you can do. Walking is always going to be great. TENS unit, laser therapy. I know a lot of chiropractic offices that offer this, and that helps break up scar tissue. Doing things like foam rolling can be really beneficial, especially when you're doing your stretches before and after exercise. Kinesiology tape, and then again, having some of that manipulation there with either chiropractic or physical therapy can be beneficial. So that is what I have for y'all, and I'm going to move this over. I know that you're going to be able to see my screen, but I want to be able to look at you and answer any questions that you might have. Rita, Healthy for Life offers cupping and taping. Yeah, thank you. That is a great example of crowdsourcing. And then Purify You as a BAMA perk. Awesome, awesome. Debbie says, thanks for all the links. Yes, thank you, Miranda, for doing that. Awesome. Yes, there's lots of great things that Wellbema offers and that we have as a benefit. Yeah, so your son offers therapeutic massage. Thank you, Rita. Thanks for telling us about that. Yeah, so Beth, it's called Protocol for Life Balance. It's a red bottle and it has vitamin D3 and potassium. Protocol for Life Balance. It's a reddish orange bottle, D3 and potassium. And I bought mine online. And of course, always ask your provider if that's good for you. And you want to know your levels before you start supplementing with vitamin D. So always contact your healthcare provider before you start or change anything. Any other questions or comments? Do y'all feel like y'all have a plan?
Sorry.
Go
There
ahead,
was
Marita.
one in the Q&A that says, does anyone have other affirmation sayings that they like?
I can share one if they're and please put some in the chat. After my surgery, I was so discouraged. I started saying, I'm getting better every day in every way. And I would repeat that 10 times because that covers everything. And that made me feel like I was doing something to help myself. So that's another one I like to add. And I read in a book recently that some people will add on to that like a word of affirmation, like they'll say to sparkle or to shine, or they'll repeat their word of the year. If y'all don't have a word of the year practice, I always pick mine for the new year. And so for this year, my word of the year is magic. And so I'll say things like, I believe in magic. And that's just my reminder of like, I'm expecting good things to happen. Thanks for catching that one, Miranda. We've got a couple more minutes. Anything that y'all want to ask, y'all are welcome to put it in the Q&A anonymously, or any feedback that you might have. Yes, I absolutely recommend the Hinge Health program. It's free. You can get some free goodies, which is always nice. And they have physical therapists that actually develop their programs and act as your coaches. And ironically enough, my physical therapist in Birmingham actually has a good friend that works for Hinge Health, and I didn't know that. I asked her if she was aware of that app and if that would be something good to supplement my therapy with her. And she's like, yeah, actually, one of my good friends works for them and helps develop their program. So I have really enjoyed it. Thanks for putting that in the chat, Carolyn. Yes, open to employees and dependents. I've had a great experience with it. I started it in January. Thanks, Gina. I hope you all have had a good experience with today's class. As always, if you have feedback or have other questions or things that you'd like to reach out and ask us about, please feel free. But just start small. And I would start with trying to track when you're having aches and pains and symptoms, and look at some of those wellness basics and kind of weigh in on where are you and kind of do that for a week or so. And then you can start looking at, okay, what are the things I want to proactively do to impact that root cause, while you're also doing some of the other fun stuff, like red light therapy or like walking and, getting sunshine. All of that together will really start to change your life, but it's just going to be those little micro steps that you're taking. So don't get discouraged, and make it as fun as possible. And maybe find someone that is on the call, or maybe a colleague that would like to do it with you. I think doing things in accountability and in connection community is always more fun. And yeah, we've got some recommendations. A couple of people have enjoyed Hinge as well, so that's great. Well, y'all, I'll offer y'all a big roll tide, and I hope that y'all go just pick one thing today that you're going to focus on, and maybe that's just an affirmation. And so I'm wishing y'all all the best. And yes, Miranda has put the slides in the chat, and y'all can come back to it after the class finishes. So thanks so much, guys. Have a good day.